So, in early November, I went away for a few days and told my Twitch chat that, of course, I was going on family vacation. But as many of you correctly guessed, I actually went out to Washington to play a little bit of Destiny 2 Renegades before release. And yeah, I know it's really damn obvious when many Destiny creators all suddenly go on vacation at the exact same time, but yeah, when you're under NDA, the only thing you can really do is smile and wink at the camera. Anyway, but I want to be really clear, the purpose of me going on that trip was not to give feedback to fix the current state of the game or to help create or shape Renegades in any way. It was not a quote summit like some people had guessed or anything like that to discuss the current state of the game as much as I really wanted to. It was simply to go out and play Renegades a little bit early and have some fun. Usually by the time people like me are there and trying things out in the game, the content is all pretty much completely finished at that point. And with that little explanation out of the way, why don't we talk about Renegades? Is it fun? With the current state of Destiny being what it is it worth coming back for? Do I recommend it? Yada yada yada. Hard questions for sure, but by the end of the video, I'm gonna give you my honest answers. Right now though, why don't we start off by talking about what Renegades brings to the table. What's new, what's it like, giving some details on the content, but also keeping it spoiler-free campaign-wise, which is actually not too difficult for me to do because we only played a little bit of the story while we were out there, meaning I too am still fairly in the dark for the majority of the story. If you've been out of the loop for a really long time though and have zero idea what this upcoming season is at all, Destiny 2 Renegades is basically an official crossover with Star Wars. And starting on a positive note, I'm going to give credit where I think credit is due. Speaking 100% thematically, meaning I'm not talking about how I feel about the content overall, not talking about the new activity, not talking about the gameplay loops or the sandbox, none of that stuff. Just from a pure visual, audio, and thematic standpoint, I do kind of think they nailed the Star Wars theme pretty hard. The weapons look and feel both very Star Wars and very Destiny at the same time. And by the way, I fully know that some players out there will literally not give a shit about that at all. And you know what? Totally valid. But again, just from a thematic standpoint, I think they achieved what they were trying to accomplish with Renegades. That is to say, if you still currently enjoy playing Destiny 2 in the year of our Lord 2025, and you're also a very big fan of Star Wars, I think this is really going to tickle your brain in the right way. There's a bunch of new weapons, many of which have a new heat weapon intrinsic trait. The short version is the more you fire them, they will build up a heat meter, eventually needing to be exhausted. You can exhaust the weapon manually, which kind of functions like a regular reload, but they also just naturally cool down over time. And while all the weapons feel good to use and look very Star Wars, there's a few that stand out extra hard. The Uncivil Discourse blaster pistol, which is coded as a hand cannon, is exactly how you hoped a Star Wars blaster would feel and shoot and sound in the world of Destiny. It's actually probably going to be pretty good in PvP. When we were all fiddling around with it, we meaning the other creators who were there, pretty much agreed it felt like a harder hitting version of Forerunner. Even though Forerunner is a sidearm, they still feel and shoot kind of similarly, and they have a really similar scope. Also, the lightsaber exotic in particular, which in Destiny is called a Praxic Blade, is insanely satisfying. And I don't just mean visually and thematically on this one. Like, it's actually a genuinely fun exotic with a fair amount of customization going on under the hood. You can swing your Praxic Blade to cut through enemies, you can throw it at enemies, and after traveling for a little bit, it returns back to you. And if you hold down the guard button, you can spin it around and literally deflect shots back at the attacker. I can't get into specifics at this time, but it does have the ability to apply elemental keywords to enemies, meaning there is a way for you to apply Scorch, Jolt, Weaken, Sever, and Slow via direct attacks with the blade. Not all at the same time, of course. There's 3 colors you can use on your Praxic Blade, and you can probably guess what they are: red, blue, and green. What's that? You saw a trailer on Twitter that showed you another color? Huh, how about that? If only I was allowed to say more, but I've heard Bungie's legal team are really good shots, and my home has clean windows, if you know what I'm saying. Quick side note, by the way, the YouTube video I'm putting up tomorrow, I think, is going to be a slightly more detailed look at all the new exotics coming in Renegades, including the Praxic Blade. Again, what I'm allowed to tell you about it, but yeah, goddamn fun. These aren't exactly weapons per se, but in the Renegade story, you'll have access to Renegade abilities. If you remember from the trailer, this is the very Helldivers-esque move of whipping out a coin and flicking it out onto the battlefield and calling in support, either in the form of supplying you and your team or effing up the enemy. There's a couple interesting options, including putting a cage around enemies that blinds them, stuff like that, but I think the one I enjoyed the most was calling in a Cabal drop pod. Not just because it's satisfying to watch that happen to somebody else for a change, but even if you miss, the drop pod has an insane amount of special and heavy ammo that it just barfs all over the field. And there's stuff with more Star Wars flair to it too. You can call in a vehicle, which is basically the Destiny version of an ATST, which is kind of fun. I should mention that all of these things you can yeet out onto the battlefield to cause destruction aren't all fully unlocked right away. You gotta grind them out, and some of them can eventually be upgraded as well. The environments in Renegades are also very Star Wars. You've got foresty Endor-like locations, you've got deserty Tatooine-like locations, you've got frozen Hoth-like locations. You get the idea. There's also a cantina-themed social area where you're gonna stop in every now and then to pick up new quests and have a few conversations with some of the new NPCs. There's also 3 different factions that hang out at the cantina: a Vex-themed faction called Tharsis Reformation, a Cabal faction called the Totality Division, and a Fallen faction called the Pikers. Eventually, you'll have the option to pledge loyalty to one of these factions and gain faction rep from running smuggling operations for them, which can yield unique rewards. I believe you can swap faction allegiance at will though, which I gotta admit I find a little disappointing. I think it might have been more interesting if you could pick only one faction for life and just go full-on ride or die mode, but other people probably wouldn't like that very much. Story-wise, again, we didn't get too far, which is probably for the best, but it did at least start on an interesting note. We have a new antagonist voiced by the great Alex Lee, aka XX Shadow Lord 420XX, real ones know, who is basically a Destiny Guardian hardcore inspired by Kylo Ren. His deal seems to be that he wants to pick up the mantle of and carry on in the footsteps of Dredgen Yor, and also convince Drifter to come back to his roots of being a bad guy. But the Drifter is resisting because thanks to Eris Morn, he's a better guy. He's no longer for the streets, whatever you want to call it. While I was interested in the story, I can't really imagine the story in Renegades being anything other than maybe a fun sidetrack while we wait for the actual story in the Fate Saga to further develop. I'm sure that at the end of the Renegades campaign, they're gonna somehow tie things back into the Fate Saga to some degree, but again, the vibes I was getting early on were, yeah, this is a fun Star Wars themed side story, and we're probably not gonna find answers to the major questions that we've been looking for in regards to the overall Fate Saga. Although I would be happy to be proven wrong in that department. There's a new directory/activity in Renegades called Lawless Frontier, and the smuggling missions you can run work as follows. Remember how earlier I mentioned you're gonna pledge loyalty to one of those 3 factions? Well, you go launch up Lawless Frontier and go on a smuggling mission to do stuff for that faction. These missions are, you get dropped into a place, you complete a few different objectives while fighting off lots of enemies, and if you get everything done in the time allowed, you succeed and get rewards. If time expires and you don't get everything done, you fail and get fewer rewards. Furthermore, there are different ways to play. If you go into a regular version of a Lawless Frontier operation, you are unable to be invaded by any other players. It's a more peaceful version of the activity, but the rewards aren't quite as good. However, if you go into the other version of Lawless Frontier, you leave your fire team open to being attacked by an enemy invader, meaning that at some point during your normally peaceful activity, you can get invaded by a random ass solo D2 player whose objective becomes to just straight up murder your team. Why would anyone choose to willingly play an activity where you have the potential to be invaded by a random D2 player? Because the rewards in that version of the activity are apparently more generous. If and when you get invaded by another D2 player, everything suddenly turns into something vaguely reminiscent of Gambit. You and your bros suddenly become paranoid and start looking all over the place for the invader, and when they show up, it turns into a big old firefight. And remember earlier I mentioned those Renegade abilities that you can flick out onto the battlefield? Those abilities are active in Lawless Frontier, both for the regular team doing mission objectives and for the invading Guardian as well. I won't speak for anybody else, but I did personally have fun playing this activity. I liked the chaos of fighting off the invader and also being an invader. And while it's hard to make full-on concrete opinions about a game type that I only played probably at max for maybe an hour, I will say that the regular no invasion version of Lawless Frontier did start to feel a little repetitive after a certain point. It was actually kind of the same vibe in the invasion mode if you managed to kill the enemy invader 3 times very fast, at which point they get booted out of the lobby completely. Don't get me wrong, it was definitely fun knowing we successfully fended off the invader for good, but it seems you can only get invaded once per game. Meaning, once we knew the invader was gone for good, the activity basically just turned into the regular, quiet version of Lawless Frontier. I don't know if things will be different in the fully released version, so take the feedback with a grain of salt, but yeah. Oh, also, it is possible for 2 invaders to get matched against each other. If that does happen, the 2 invaders literally engage in a full-on 1v1. That was also kind of awesome, but yeah, bottom line is if you see me out there in Lawless Frontier, odds are really good I'm going to be doing the invader mode because better loot, apparently, and also the more exciting version of the mode, in my opinion. Quality of life-wise, Bungie's changing a few things up, some of which has already been mentioned in a dev article that came out after our trip to play Renegades, but before the release of today's video. Things like all exotic weapons and armor are now featured. I feel like I understood what Bungie wanted to accomplish with certain exotics being featured, but I also definitely get why many in the community didn't like that system. Kinda conflicts with the whole play your way type thing. Also, not only has the vault been increased by 300 slots, which is a lot, but now it has a filtering system so you can find things way easier. You've also got the new exotic armor ornament system, which allows you to use literally any exotic armor ornament you own on an exotic of the same class and slot. For example, if you're a hunter wearing the Aeon Swift exotic gauntlets, you could use an exotic ornament for young Ahamkara's spine if you wanted to. Again, I can imagine some players not really giving a shit about that at all, and again, I understand. And on that note, why don't we talk about my full-on feelings about Renegades as a whole. If you used to play Destiny, and maybe you tapped out recently or even a long time ago, and you're here out of pure curiosity, peering over the fence and wondering the question, is Renegades the expansion that completely saves the game and ushers the franchise into a new golden age? The answer to that is no. But then again, I don't think that Renegades will save Destiny is a realistic expectation to even begin with. At the end of the day, Renegades is simply more Destiny, which could either be good or bad depending on how you feel about the state of the game right now. If you still enjoy playing right now, maybe not 100% hardcore no-lifing the game, but you enjoy logging on once or twice a week to do whatever, yeah, you're probably going to enjoy this. But if you weren't incredibly wowed by the Edge of Fate and you're taking an extended hiatus from Destiny while waiting for big foundation rocking changes to arrive, yeah, I kind of doubt this is going to move the needle for you. The only exception would be if you're a massive Star Wars fan, because again, I really feel like thematically they did kind of nail the crossover aspect pretty well. Players who are fans of both Destiny and Star Wars will likely really enjoy this, but to be fair, those people probably already pre-ordered months ago. For me personally, I'm definitely going to play and grind Renegades when it comes out, but after a couple weeks go by and I eventually experience all that Renegades has to offer, I'll probably keep doing what I'm doing right now, which is take a break and go play something else, which I think is fine. I'm always going to keep my fingers crossed in my heart of hearts that Destiny will eventually make a huge comeback in a meaningful way someday, whenever and however that looks like. I don't think Renegades is that gigantic return to glory moment that many people in the community have been waiting for, but I also don't think Renegades was ever supposed to be that. I think if that moment ever does come, we'll probably all recognize it immediately. But until then, knock on wood, I'll at least be able to have fun with a blaster pistol and carving up shit with a lightsaber. Another video coming tomorrow, probably on the exotics coming in Renegades, some of which are pretty sick. Happy Thanksgiving, stay safe, and mad love. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.